Hello, welcome to a new episode of The Zoo. Today we're going to tackle the topic of Internet of Things, how that impacts the IT managers in the enterprise, how they will have to look at how they purchase and deploy. And to help us understand these and other tricks is the biker of BMC, John Hall. Tell us first of all, John, about the 200 Ks you just put on your legs.
Yeah, that was 2 days ago, and I like doing these events called Audaxes, which are kind of quite anarchy, relatively low participation, very informal cake runs, basically, over long distances, and decided to go and do some riding out near where Chris lives in Wales. And hey, I'm from southeast England. It's so flat you can watch your pets run away for days, but turns out they've got sort of lumpy bits out there, and quite a lot of them, and quite steep ones too.
Have you done any of those races, Chris? I know you bike too.
I do bike, but I don't think I'd like to do it in the company of others. I think that would just be embarrassing for.
I didn't stay in the company of others for very long. They were mostly into the distance.
Well, the topic at hand is not biking, although that is exciting. It is Internet of Things and the exponential growth that we are seeing or expecting. But where will we see them? Let's start with where will we see the most growth right now? I heard farmers use them. I understand warehouses use them. Will average offices have things?
I think absolutely there will be. There are many predictions and projections as to how big the Internet of Things is going to get. Probably one of the more, the more accepted ones is Gartner, who are looking at a rise in the number of connected, IP-enabled devices from a total of 4.9 billion now, and that's a lot compared to 5 years ago, up to 20 billion or more. And there's there's even bigger numbers out there. I mean, Cisco projecting 30 billion plus. They're obviously quite a stakeholder in the process, so maybe they see things getting even bigger. But regardless, we do know that there's going to be a huge number of additional digital devices online in the next 5 years, and there's no reason to think a lot of those won't be in the enterprise. Interestingly, they could be anywhere. As you say, we're used to managing computers and servers and things that are familiar to IT, but the sensors and devices of the Internet of Things are much broader. They can be in many different aspects of the business.
Chris, if you're living in a slightly rural area, do you see something like that around you, or is it when you come into the offices in London or Houston that you run into this technology? Is it spread?
Yeah, well, yes is the short answer. So you gave the example of farming. And even around here, some of the older equipment, some of the people I know are retrofitting various sensor devices, particularly on things like seed drills for automated reordering and maintenance schedule detection, and buying a complete service from their agricultural supplier that includes the device itself plus all the other supplier hubs, networks, connections, maintenance packages. So we're kind of seeing that, and then clearly in the large commercial cities here in Wales have as up to date in London in terms of the technology they employ, absolutely. But I agree with John. I think this the rise of what some are calling, forget IT, that's easy. Welcome to OT, operational technology, and it's much more voluminous, and there's lots of new things to learn. So I think it's going to be an absolute explosion in almost every industry you care to mention.
So how do we manage that? Because right now we have a hard time in the IT departments and the operational department to run thousands of pieces. Now we're talking about billions of pieces. Anything from the cost and deployment to depreciation. Are we going to see a sharp change in how we approach our relationship with vendors and so on?
I think that we'll probably see operational needs driving how we manage things. If you look at the role, for example, of the IT asset manager, one of the simplest things that they've always aimed to do is, or typically aimed to do, is to provide the service organization with a view of what's out there. And that can be as straightforward as, when I phone the service desk, they already know what PC is allocated to me. they hopefully have an idea of what's installed on it so that they can start supporting it quicker rather than having to do that investigation every time. What will be interesting is if we start seeing digital connected devices becoming critical to business processes that maybe IT didn't have that governance over, and suddenly the service desk is getting a call about that sensor on the truck in the loading bay, or that temperature monitor in the data center that's to do with the air conditioning system. Because all these things can suddenly start impacting digital services through the business in a new and interesting kind of way.
Chris, and I'll let John come back to this too. What do you think is going to be next? What's the next? How will this change my life?
How's it going to change your life? Well, I think on the home front, clearly there's going to be a proliferation of smarter and smarter devices. They've already kind of crept in somewhat. So our television appears to have a huge amount of computing power and lots of things that I can do on it as a so-called smart TV. But it's very evident to me that in all those capabilities that are being offered to us in terms of digital connectivity and the fact I can just throw a program at it from my iPad, which is amazing. Clearly, it's a highly intelligent piece of digital infrastructure connected to my network, and it's just the beginning. So I think we'll see more and more insidious creeping of digitization like that. Soon you won't have a choice but to buy an IP-enabled device, whatever that is. I think the metering explosion is going to be huge. A lot of organizations, and particularly in bigger cities now, have invested heavily in smart metering and interactive power management. And some of that technology is very, very clever and just rolling out in pockets right now, but I think that will really start to gather pace. And I think we're going to have to fairly short order. John made a very interesting point there about some of the IT being confronted with new kinds of technology, which might have some different rules about the most effective way of how to manage it. So I'm very interested to see, as part of the next wave, whether we see a convergence of some traditional industrial practices that have been established for a couple of hundred years as it relates to the efficiency of production equipment in general, whether we'll see some of that start to be pulled into emerging best practice for a broader definition of technology. I think we'll see new kinds of devices, but I think what I'm really interested in is the management challenge and where we will borrow the ideas from to help us get it right.
How will IT deal with the management challenge? What do they have to do, John, to handle this explosion?
I think, like all these challenges, they have to drive it by the things that are priorities. I mean, it's not necessarily worth spending huge time and resources going out and cataloging absolutely everything and what it does. But that's got to be weighed against the challenge of figuring out what is really critical to the organization. So the IT has to find ways of getting visibility of that, and maybe it's a question of, from a process point of view, connecting with the service owners out in the business, the line of business who are doing stuff that employs this technology. I mean, this is the heart of what BMC is calling digital service management. Is services are not just small contained backroom functions anymore run by IT. They're part of what your business does day to day, and I think we need to make sure as IT that we're figuring out where we might be called on to handle stuff that breaks down on this on a much wider front of business scale.
Yep. Well, thank you both for taking time coming to the zoo. I find it very interesting to see how IoT fits with digital service management and other new trends that we're seeing popping up. So we probably will have more discussions around this. Thank you both very much.